friends, we see a 16-year-old Roger returning home from school for the summer vacation. His mother has sent a maid, Mrs. Muller, in a horse cart to receive him. On the way, Roger is captivated by Mrs. Muller's body, which he can't stop gazing at. Muller notices this, but doesn't say anything to him. Soon they arrive at a beautiful mansion where Roger is greeted by his mother and Aunt Margaret. A maid named Ursula helps him with his stuff and asks him whether he remembers her, and he affirms. He's then introduced to his father's old friend Frank, and once inside, Roger's little sister, Berth, welcomes him with a warm hug. Later, Berth takes Roger on a walk in the forest where they see Mrs. Muller picking fruits. Unexpectedly, Mrs. Muller lifts her dress and relieves herself, which surprises Roger. As he continues to walk, Roger hears some chuckling in the distance. He's curious about what's going on, so he peers his head out and is shocked to see Ursula sleeping with a man. Ursula notices him as well and greets him, but Roger runs away immediately. That evening, Roger is having dinner with his family. His mother is quite strict and tells everyone to behave when eating. After dinner, Roger goes to his room, but he hears some noises outside and takes a look. He's shocked to find another of his maids, Helen, sleeping with someone from behind the door. Helen resists a bit, but she lets it happen, and after the man finishes, she walks away to her job. When Roger returns to his room and goes to sleep, he notices Berth on his bed. She claims she can't sleep and wants to speak with her brother, whom she has missed greatly. Berth claims that their mother told her that Aunt Margaret is a virgin because she's terrified of men. When Roger wonders why Frank and his aunt aren't together, Berth shares that it's because Frank isn't very good looking and a bit strange. Just then, Berth's babysitter Kate arrives and scolds her for leaving her bed, so the girl rushes back to her room. When Kate notices Roger's rising blankets, she pulls them off and the embarrassed Roger covers himself. Next, Bertha and Roger visit a riverbank to watch their maids bathe. While they are talking, 3 men pass them by, who also happen to be Roger's house servants. They start showing off their genitals to the maids from across the river. Seeing this, Ursula also amuses them by showing off her bare backside while Roger is in utter disbelief. Later, Roger's older sister Elisa arrives home with their father. Elisa embraces everyone in the mansion with a hug, but only gives Roger a peck on the cheek. Later, his father talks with the family about his business, which is selling medals to military troops. But because there is no war going on, his business is not making money. Later, a servant catches Roger peeking beneath women's dresses and scolds him, so he runs away and goes to church with Berth. They hide in the ceiling and try to hear some confessions, but Berth becomes bored and leaves. Aunt Margaret then walks in and begins confessing her sins. While she always has been afraid of men, she has found herself attracted to Roger. She fantasizes about him and even thinks about sleeping with him. Roger is so excited to hear this, but just then, the ceiling collapses, causing him to fall directly in front of the priest. Following this, the priest informs his mother, who requests that Roger needs to be punished. The priest orders them to whip Roger with a wild bush to teach him a lesson. Roger's mother agrees with this and requests that Aunt Margaret punish him. Meanwhile, Elisa's fiancé, Roland, enters the house and laughs at Roger. Margaret is initially hesitant, but after some convincing from her sister, she agrees and whips him. Meanwhile, Ursula and Berth watch this from the window, feeling terrible for Roger. Later, Berth comforts her brother and kisses him goodnight. Soon, Roger hears Helen making love with someone in the hallway again. By a cabinet, he notices that Frank is also watching this. Then, he meets Ursula, who says that she also doesn't know who Helen's mystery man is. Now Roger goes to the attic, where he discovers Frank touching himself at the sight. When Frank leaves, Roger looks through the telescope and sees a couple fornicating outside. Frank has also left a book, which Roger quickly grabs. When he finds that it is an adult book, he gets hooked and begins reading it. When Frank returns, Roger wonders if he was also frustrated as a teenager, and Frank admits that he still feels that way. While returning, Roger hears noises from his parents' room. He curiously peeks through their keyhole, but gets caught by Roland. Roger asks Roland not to snitch on him, and in return he agrees to do whatever Roland asks. So Roland takes the opportunity and asks Roger to wash his car tomorrow. The following morning, Roger reluctantly washes Roland's car, but he gets back at Roland by placing a bucket of water where Roland trips over and falls. Later, Roger hides in the chicken coop and opens the book of dirty fantasies. Suddenly, a servant enters the stable, causing Roger to hastily hide himself. Moments later, Helen arrives to feed the chickens, but the servant locks her in through the window and goes outside where he sleeps with her. Helen then notices Roger and asks for his help, but just as he's about to help, she tells him to wait, as she's liking it. Roger grows suspicious, but before he realizes what's happening outside, the servant has already left. Later, Roger finds his mother with Elisa and Roland. Roland complains about his muddy boots and orders Roger to clean them, but Roger declines. This makes Roland furious, and he reveals to Roger's mother that the boy was spying in their room yesterday. She becomes infuriated hearing this and instructs him to leave the house. But Roger seizes the chance to swap his dirty book for Eliza's and watches her as she reads it. Soon, Roger becomes aware that everyone in the house is involved in intimate activities except for him. So he heads to the kitchen and tries to approach Ursula to make love to her. However, Ursula is taken aback and smashes a plate over his head. When she recognizes Roger, she tends to his injury while pressing her body near his face. But unfortunately, another maid enters and interrupts the situation. Now Roger grows impatient, so he spots Miss Muller and decides to make love to her. He follows her to a church and eventually grabs her from behind and begins to have fun. Initially, Muller asks him to stop, but soon she starts encouraging him by lifting her skirt. However, their actions are interrupted when a postman arrives to announce that the World War has begun, with Germany attacking France. At home, Roger's father is overjoyed that the war has started because he can now start expanding his business. The war also means that every man in Roger's family will be required to join the military. However, Frank states that he won't be able to fight due to his asthma. Next, Elisa and Roland exchange their final words before Roland leaves for war. Because Roger is too young to fight, he stays behind while the other men go off to battle. He's overjoyed that in a house full of women, he is the only man, and he thanks God for this opportunity. Later, Ursula requests Roger help in carrying a mattress upstairs. In the bedroom, he starts making advances towards her, and she finds his actions amusing. Eventually, she closes the door, undresses in front of Roger, and they become intimate. Afterward, Roger reveals his feelings for Ursula and proposes marriage to her. Ursula responds with a lighthearted laugh, understanding that he's saying this because it was his first experience with a woman. On his way out, Roger spots Berth, who teases him and asks what happened, but he doesn't respond clearly. She convinces Roger to join her in eavesdropping on their mother's confession to the priest. During the confession, their mother discusses the challenges she faces due to her husband's fantasies. She mentions that her husband engages in various intimate positions, and although she enjoys it, she feels that it's a sin. However, the priest reassures her, stating that she can do anything she wishes with her husband without it being considered a sin. Suddenly, the mother hears her children giggling and scolds them for hindering her privacy. Later, as Kate brushes her hair by the river, Roger emerges from the water, catching her off guard. When he asks why she never used to sit by the river before, Kate responds that she no longer feels threatened since the men have gone to fight. Roger confesses that he's always found her attractive, and Kate reveals that Ursula told her wonderful things about him. In a playful gesture, Roger splashes water onto Kate, after which the two make love. That evening, Roger's father returns home for a brief visit, because as a colonel, he can come and go as he pleases. That night, Roger observes Margaret and Kate secretly peering into his parents' room. He curiously opens the door and enters, only to witness his parents engaged in a role play. They're taken aback when they discover Roger inside the room and throw him out. Later, Margaret returns to her room and discovers Roger on her bed. He confides in her, revealing that he knows she's still a virgin and offers his help. Although Margaret is initially hesitant, they start flirting, and eventually the two end up getting intimate. The next day, Roger notices that Frank has received a package, so he follows the man to the attic and notices him peering inside a wooden box containing adult pictures. When Roger questions why he doesn't just sleep with women, Frank responds that sex is only simple for someone like Roger. Later, Helen carries tea to Roger's room, and since all the men have left, no one else grabs her in the corridor. She then gives Roger tea, but before she leaves, Roger pulls, and they get intimate again. Next, Roger is having fun in the garden with Berth. She wonders if her brother was the one who slept with Kate, Ursula, and the other girls, and Roger claims to have slept with nearly all of the women who live here. Just then, he notices Elisa and then follows her to the stable. While Elisa is brushing a horse, Roger offers to take her shoes off of her feet. However, he starts caressing her improperly. Elisa tries to stop her brother, but they hear Mrs. Muller and hide inside the stables. Elisa soon succumbs to her urges, and she and Roger become intimate. Soon, every woman in the house except his mother queues up to be served by Roger. He has so much fun that he sometimes amuses 3 women at once. Days later, after he and Elisa make love, she admits that she may be pregnant and is extremely worried. Suddenly, a jet flies overhead, and she pulls Roger behind a tree so Roland doesn't see them. Roland lands and says that the war is over and that all of the men have returned. Roger is now in big trouble, and he starts to think of ways to turn this game around. That evening, Ursula enters Roger's room to inform him that she is expecting a child. Before she leaves, he requests that she bring him a bottle of red nail polish. Then, Margaret walks in and informs him that she too is pregnant. Roger suggests that she marry her Uncle Frank to avoid scandal. When Ursula returns with red nail polish, Roger takes her to Elisa's room. There, he directs Ursula to apply nail polish to his sister's sheets. Elisa is enraged, so he urges her to call Roland and tell him that they must make love right away. After this, Roger goes to Kate's room to ask if she's pregnant, and to his relief, she says she is not. Finally, he approaches Ursula, proposes marriage to her, but she declines because she's in love with someone else. Days later, the 3 women marry their partners on the same day, and Roger's trouble is over. After a few days, his summer vacation comes to an end, and he prepares to leave for school. Just then, Helen appears and informs him that she is also pregnant. Roland assures her that he will find her a husband, but Helen tells him there's no need, because several men in this house have been with her, so she will blame anybody she likes and marry him. After this, we see Roger leaving for the city, and as the movie comes to an end.